Welcome, everybody. I'm Lisa Jolly, Senior Director of Donor Services and Development at the Columbus Foundation. This is our second professional council for this year, so we're glad to have you all here join us. We're going to have an internal panelist today, and I hope that you are all doing well and that you are finding new ways to engage your clients. We are still working remotely, but we are flexible to what you and your clients may need. We have a very informative webinar planned for you today. This will be recorded and available after it is done for anyone who wishes to watch it. In addition, if you have any questions during the webinar, please post them in the chat box, and I will be sure the speakers address any of the questions that are raised. And as always, we are grateful to all of you and the work that you are doing with our mutual clients and donors. And I'm going to turn it over to our President CEO, Doug Kreider.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I wanted to echo Lisa's sentiments that, we missed being with you. It would be great to think that we could be in Davis Hall together and catching up with you and hearing what your challenges and thoughts and concerns and questions are. But we hope that in the absence of the being in person, that you will, as Lisa mentioned, please be forthcoming with any questions that you have. We started this pandemic journey on March 2nd, Monday, March 2nd. We called a leadership team meeting and we set forward our plans. And as you may or may not recall, we on that day also canceled our coming together in person for our 5 Nonprofits to Watch event, which was one of the first events in the community to be canceled. So we had some questions, well, like, geez, why would you do that? And of course, as the days went on, it became clear that that was the wiser thing to do. But on that day, we also quickly realized that there were going to be significant impacts in our community. And so we set up the Emergency Response Fund, something that didn't have any precedent actually in Columbus, let alone at the Columbus Foundation. But within 2 weeks, we had both identified money that we could allocate towards it and then receive generous contributions from a host of folks ranging from the Haslams up in Cleveland to Diamond Hill within our own donor family and an anonymous donor who came forward with a significant gift. And so we were off and running and trying to help the helpers, if you will, with a nod towards Fred Rogers when he was concerned with what was going on in the world. He asked his mother about it, and she said, well, look for the helpers. And really, I think these times have helped us not only come to appreciate the so-called essential workers, the frontline workers, as well, that we're so exposed to the mystery of how to even protect oneself from this virus, but also the nonprofit sector and to what extent it is the helper sector. And, many nonprofits had to shut down because of the health orders, mandates, but many also continued. And in fact, the needs for their work and their services was greater than ever. And so the Emergency Response Fund has to date given over $5 million. We turn around the grants sometimes within hours, but at least within a week to get the funds to the helpers who are helping others get through these challenging times. You don't need me to tell you that those times are probably not going away anytime soon. And if it weren't really for the CARES Act dollars, I think an example of Washington working, actually, the CARES Act dollars have really helped a lot of people, a lot of organizations, that as those spend out, we turn the corner on a new year, our anticipation is that things will indeed become even more of a struggle for a lot of people. So we're ready. I had just speaking for myself, I came 5 weeks after 9/11. I came with the absolute expressed thought in my mind that if I could help hold the center during volatile times, that I needed to do that. For me, it was like, signing up for the military at a time of war. And here we are still at volatile times. And if you think about the Columbus Foundation, it too was built to do the same thing and was established in the middle of World War II. So we have both an institution and a commitment throughout this organization to build for these times, to be prepared to step up. And whether it be the Emergency Response Fund, our efforts to span the globe to get PPE for nursing homes and other places that could not get access to them, to stepping up and doing the big give despite the odds. One wouldn't have expected the kind of result that we had, which is an 82% increase over the last big give, which was in 2017 at a better time for people and a more certain time for our country. There were contributions from every state in the Union and 11 countries around the globe during the big give. And it was an astounding result that it shows that the people in our community were looking for a way to help, that they may have been housebound, but they were generosity motivated. And it just was an extraordinary success for our nonprofits. Again, 100% of those contributions go and went to the nonprofits. To the celebration that we just had, and we just announced last Friday then that we're going to do the big the big table, which is a day of connection, a day of conversation. Of course, we're not able to do it live, but that's coming on Friday, October 16th. And we just feel that's our little internal tagline is that just when we need it the most, connection and conversation, trying to build understanding amongst each other is a noble endeavor, and we hope it's well received. So I'll close with that and just thank you all for sticking with this. I will attest to the fact that since that March 2nd date, it has been 7 days a week. I got outside Route 270, the outer belt, one time since March 2nd, and that is to visit somebody up in Canton. So it's been all hands on deck, and it's been an endurance contest, but it's one that we're proud of our efforts around, and I hope you are too, and I appreciate your support along the way, because it's really, really needed. So with that, Lisa, I'll hand it back to you, and thank you, everyone. I'm happy to again take questions along the way or at any time.
Thanks, Doug. So during this webinar, Foundation experts will cover a variety of hot charitable topics, including first Brad Britton, who's the Director of Planned Giving and General Counsel at the Columbus Foundation. Brad will be covering stretching the charity. The Secure Act hasn't entirely killed off the stretch for individual retirement accounts and offer retirement plans. Brad will discuss a tried and true charitable planning technique that continues to provide great flexibility, the T-CRUT. Following Brad will be Stefanie Coffman, who's the Manager of Corporate Philanthropy at the Columbus Foundation. Stefanie will tackle the discussion on employee assistance programs. And then following Stefanie will be Matt Martin, who's the Community Research and Grants Management Officer at the Columbus Foundation. And Matt's going to clarify the digital divide for us.
Thank you for this opportunity to talk to you about this topic. This is a presentation adapted from an article I posted on LinkedIn several weeks ago, and you are welcomed and even encouraged to link into me and view the article online, even if you listen to this presentation, mainly so that I get better numbers for my article views and my colleagues will stop taunting me about the relatively higher number of views that they have for their articles. A very fragile ego here, very insecure. So please feel free to ask questions via the chat function. Like Lisa said, as I'm talking, I can stop as needed. My colleagues will tell you the only thing that's worse than me mansplaining in person is me mansplaining on Zoom. So you don't want that. Before I get into the specific topic, which is of course about a charitable giving technique, let me ask the question I always ask before I present on a charitable giving technique, and that is, what does a client need to have before employing any charitable giving technique? And if you want to be brave, you can put an answer in the chat feature. I'll honor you for that. I'll give you just a few seconds. Of course, I'm sure, once Doug's done talking, maybe some of you have already headed for the refrigerator, gone off to the bathroom. Let's see, we have Justin. Assets to give. Yes, Justin, that's true, but I'm looking for something. The answer is embedded in my question. What does somebody have to have before employing any charitable giving technique? Aha, Doug Feller. Doug Feller gets the prize. I'm not sure what that is, but he says intent, charitable intent. Carter Hatch also said charitable intent, a close second. Very good. It's like the Kentucky Derby here. So, your client must first and foremost be motivated by a desire to give, because, there's no guarantee that a charitable giving technique will make the client better off or the client's family better off. There is always necessarily a giving element. And so these techniques are not just a tax and financial play. Sometimes I see them treated like that in articles, but that's not the case. In December of 2019, it seems like a century ago, but President Trump signed into law the Secure Act of 2019. And, most people talking and writing about this new tax law have been pointing out its effect on retirement plans for both employers and employees. But those things seem to have nothing to do with charitable giving per se. So why am I butting into the conversation? And that's because the Secure Act has given prominence to this tried and true charitable planning technique that I'm covering today. So the Secure Act got a lot of press for almost completely killing off the stretch for IRAs and other retirement plans. And what I mean by the stretch is the ability to have your retirement plan paid out to your individual loved one over his or her life expectancy, and thereby stretching out the associated income tax liability. And a lot of you are heavy into retirement plan distribution, regulations and the like. And just gallons of ink, real and virtual, have been used to describe the strategies to maximize the stretch period. There's at least one attorney out there, nationally known attorney, who's made an entire living for the past few decades speaking and writing. I think she even dines out on this topic. Hello, Natalie Choate. Many of you know her. But now, unless the plan is payable to a spouse, or unless one of a very few limited exceptions applies, the stretch can't last longer than 10 years after death. So bummer for Natalie. It's harder to score a free meal for her when you're just telling people what they can't do. So what do you do if you still want the stretch for a beneficiary of a retirement plan? This can be important, not just for reasons of income tax deferral. Sometimes estate planners, financial planners recommend that clients make retirement plans payable to a trust for a beneficiary that is, I'm going to use the euphemism, a creative spender. So, it's that person in your life who might be a lot of fun, but not so good at managing money. And no names, please. You can all think of that person in your life, or maybe it's you yourself. Prior to 2020, with proper planning, that trust could last for a beneficiary's lifetime, and the retirement plan could pay to the trust for that lifetime. It could be really managed. And the types of trusts were known as the conduit version and the accumulation version. I mean, they still exist for some of these exceptions, but they didn't have to involve charity as a beneficiary, and they usually didn't. But they're just not going to get the stretching. They typically or often aren't going to get the stretching job done anymore, thanks to the Secure Act. So now we have enter the concept of the T-CRUT as the beneficiary of a retirement plan, and the T-CRUT is not something that you find on your bathroom floor if you don't clean it enough. Again, no names, please. But rather, the T-CRUT is the acronym for Testamentary Charitable Remainder Unit Trust. Let's unpack what that means. So a charitable remainder trust in general, that's a way to provide something for charity in the future after you've provided for a defined stream of payments for an individual whom you care about. And there are different flavors of charitable remainder trust. Some are funded during one's lifetime for the benefit of the trust creator. Some get funded for the benefit of the creator's loved ones after the creator dies. Some make fixed, or otherwise known as annuity, payments to the individual beneficiary. Some make variable, or also known as unit trust, payments to the individual beneficiary. Some run for a fixed term of years. that the trust defines. That can be up to 20 years. Some run for the individual beneficiary's lifetime, however long that turns out to be. Now, in this situation, I'm focusing on the flavor of a charitable remainder trust that gets funded at death. So the T in T-CRUT testamentary, that's after you're gone. The donor, the client is gone. That's going to make unitrust payments. That's the U in T-CRUT. And that'll make those to the individual beneficiary, kind of the loved one for that individual's lifetime. So here's the cycle. Donor names that can name a T-CRUT as a beneficiary of her retirement plan at her death. And then when the donor dies, the trustee of the T-CRUT can just pull out all the assets of the retirement plan, the IRA, 401k, whatever, put them into the T-CRUT. And that's not a bad thing. Often you think, oh my God, you don't want to pull out everything from retirement plan right away. Well, it's not bad in this case because the T-CRUT itself is income tax exempt. So, there could be hundreds of millions of dollars in the retirement plan, and the trust isn't going to, the T-CRUT's not going to incur itself, is not going to incur any income tax liability from the retirement plan distribution. And then the trustee pays the individual beneficiary of the T-CRUT. That's perhaps one of our creative spenders. The unitrust payments for the rest of that individual beneficiary's lifetime. And that beneficiary only pays any income tax as she or he receives the payments. So that's how we have the recreation of the stretch, the old stretch that the Secure Act has now disallowed in many other contexts. Now, at the individual beneficiary's own death, the T-CRUT terminates, and the C part comes in. The C is for charity, charitable. It distributes its remaining assets to the charity that the donor named as remainder beneficiary. We're going to look at an example of how a T-CRUT might be handy. So we have in our example, we have Antonia. She's an avid practitioner of yoga. She believes in stretching whenever possible. I'm sorry, I'm going to make a number of really terrible puns here. You're just going to have to deal with it if you're on this webinar. She extends this concept to her retirement plan. She has an IRA with assets constituting a large portion of her wealth. This is I think our estate planning, financial planning friends out there would say this is pretty common these days. People, bulk of their wealth is in retirement plans, and have a huge income tax burden, laden into them. Now, Antonia also has a son named Reggie, about whom she cares deeply, and he is a fine fellow in many respects. He holds a job, he's nice to people, but he also enjoys playing the ponies at the racetrack. And Antonia is concerned about his ability to manage a large lump sum of money at her death. Just leaving the IRA or 401k payable directly to him, not such a good idea. By the way, Reggie's named for Reggie Vanderbilt. I read a book about the Vanderbilts a few years ago. If you've heard the expression shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, they are the dictionary definition of that. Old Cornelius Vanderbilt built up the fortune. His son maintained it, but by the time he got to the next generation, it was dissipating fast. And Reggie himself dissipated a lot of his through gambling. Happens to be, just go down a quick rabbit hole here, happens to be the father of Gloria Vanderbilt, who was the mother of, who was, the fashion person. It was the mother of CNN anchor Anderson Cooper, who you will note has a day job because his grandpa dissipated his old money inheritance. So there's your shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. Poor guy has to anchor CNN and make virtually nothing compared to what his fortune would have been. So back to Antonia, she is passionate about her favorite charitable causes, particularly cat shelters where cats can stretch themselves all day long. After consulting with her legal and financial tax advisors, people like you, Antonia updates her estate plan to include a T-CRUT. She names the T-CRUT as the beneficiary of her IRA, and the T-CRUT will provide Reggie with a stream of annual payments, not like a whole big lump sum, but very, very deliberately a stream of annual payments for his lifetime. So if he can dissipate one of those. I have to keep fighting myself from not saying dissipate and saying a more vulgar word, but I think you know what I mean. He can't dissipate the retirement plan all at once. He's going to get this stream. And Antonia keys the payments to 5% of the annually revalued T-CRUT assets. Kind of a values-based decision. How much does Reggie need versus how much should the charitable beneficiary get at the end? So Antonia also provides that at Reggie's death, the remaining assets in the T-CRUT are going to be distributed to the Columbus Foundation. Imagine that, to create a field of interest fund here that's named for Antonia. And that's going to give us here at the foundation the discretion to make grants to the highest performing cat shelters out there. Again, Antonia pursuing her own charitable interest through us. Note that I said they're not grants for high performing cats, but they're grants for high performing cat shelters. we can't have too many expectations of cats themselves. So thanks in part to her regular yoga classes, Antonia does live a long life, but of course she can't live forever. So at her death, her IRA holds $1 million, and the trustee draws down the assets of the IRA tax-free, reinvests them inside of the T-CRUT, and then following Antonia's instructions in the T-CRUT, the trustee is going to make payments to Reggie annually of 5% of the assets of the T-CRUT, redetermined annually. That's the unit trust. So every year the trustee's saying, what's 5% of the fair market value of the trust assets, paying that out to Reggie. And in my example, Reggie's age 60 at the time of Antonia's death. Now let's assume that the trust assets grow at 7% per year, and then Reggie dies 24 years after Antonia. And in his case, his problem was not that he didn't stretch enough. He had too much time sitting at the racetrack. So now the present value of Reggie's payments at the time of Antonia's death is about $381,000 and change. During his lifetime, he receives a total of more than $1.5 million in unit trust payments, with each payment subject to income tax in his hands. So you're not totally, doing away with the tax, you're just deferring it, but deferring it over, 24 years versus Reggie pulling it out all at once and spending it. That's pretty good when you got somebody like Reggie involved. But the payments and also the tax, so again, the payments and also the tax liability are spaced out over time. And then importantly, not an afterthought, there's ultimately more than, in my example, more than 1.6 million available for Antonia's charitable fund at the Columbus Foundation, and that'll pursue her legacy of helping cats. Now, please, again, don't fail to notice the C in T-CRUT stands for charitable. Going back to my first point, this is not an afterthought. The whole point of this exercise is eventually to make a charitable gift with what's left in the T-CRUT after the trust is over. So, and again, anyone, as Doug and Carter each pointed out, Doug Feller and Carter Hatch, we'll say their names, their full names, so they get fully honored. Anyone pursuing the T-CRUT strategy needs charitable intent. So in my view, there are some articles on this strategy that I've seen, that they're really all about the number crunching, which is, I love it, and the tax part of it and the financial part of it, all very important, but they don't focus enough on charity as the end game here. And, Congress itself has provided in the tax law that any charitable remainder trust has to meet a test requiring that the present value of the remainder is at least 10% of the amount going into the trust. And so I like to quote Senator Charles Grassley, who's the past and current chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. He said in another context, giving means giving. So I'll end with this tip for attorneys out there who will be drafting these, a little tip. I think the part that I missed in law school is, or that didn't teach us in law school is how to make my life as easy as possible in the practice of law. And that's what I'm trying to do here. So the IRS has provided us with these template safe harbor documents for different flavors of charitable remainder trusts. You can find those in the different versions of T-CRUTs that are in the particular revenue procedures I've listed there. These documents, just like any templates, they have to be revised to fit a client's particular situation. So they're just a starting point, but they're a good starting point. I mean, they really are the right place to start, and then you can tweak them from there. And so that hopefully will save you a lot of time, maybe leave yourself some more time for yoga, for your own stretching, but don't build that time to clients. So to sum up, final pun, the stretch for retirement plans after death hasn't gone away entirely. And like with yoga, you just have to get used to some new forms. So happy to take any questions, or we can move on to the next presenter.
Thanks, Brad. We're going to move it over to Stefanie, and I will share Stefanie's presentation with you all in just a minute.
Again, thanks to Lisa for inviting me to participate today on my first professional council meeting, which leads me to kind of my introduction. I am the manager of corporate philanthropy at the Columbus Foundation for a whole whopping 5 months. So I'm definitely the newbie on the block around town. So I appreciate the opportunity here to talk with you all today about what's near and dear to my heart so far. Kind of piggybacking off of Doug's intro, this has been kind of a crazy year, and our emergency assistance programs have really taken off. So I'm going to kind of give you an overview of what an EAP is. Where it's a little bit alphabet soup around the Columbus Foundation, as I have found, as I'm learning all the new words. So EAP is my favorite so far. So like I said, just an overview, what is an EAP, how the Columbus Foundation approaches EAPs, and then I'll take any kind of questions you all have at the end. So what is an EAP? So an emergency assistance program is a program that helps companies support their employees through charitable grants, kind of when the unexpected happens, and whether that is a emergency hardship or a qualified disaster. So to kind of define those, I'll give you some context. Qualified disasters are things that acts of nature, wildfires, hurricanes, global pandemics, and emergency hardships are those things that came out of left field. You weren't really expecting. A spouse loses his or her job, car breaks down, things, things that you weren't financially expecting, and therefore creates a hardship. And so these programs then, as a result, when you have that hardship, they can't afford kind of the basic needs. So housing, utilities, internet, as we have come to, in this new digital age, becoming kind of those basic needs, and folks just can't, make those ends meet. So these programs help support those employees. As I was reviewing these earlier this morning, I realized this probably should say why an EAP at the Columbus Foundation, but it doesn't really matter which community foundation is running your EAP or any company, but these are kind of the three reasons we see companies coming to us. So the first is resource management. It takes some work to go through all of these applications and get grants out the door. So most companies don't have extra hands to do that. So the Columbus Foundation does manage the day-to-day activities of the program for our companies. Anonymity. So it can be super awkward to ask your company for help, and you're literally asking the coworker sitting at the desk next to you or Zoom call screen away from you. So moving the program outside of the company provides privacy for the employee during their time of need and eliminates that coworker to coworker decision making that can, be awkward in lots of different ways. And probably the one that you're all most interested in as guidance to companies is the tax-free grants. But so by setting up a donor advised fund at the foundation, the grants then provided to the employees are tax-free. Certainly, obviously, wouldn't want to create an extra burden when you're already in a financial hardship of having to worry about then paying taxes on that gift. So what EAP looks like at the Columbus Foundation. So when I started, it was back in April, and in the height of craziness, it was a one-person team. And today I'm happy to say it is a three-person team. So including myself, we just recently added an EAP assistant. I think it's just a testament to Doug and the leadership at the Columbus Foundation is how important these programs are. That we added an extra pair of hands to make so that we can add new programs as well as get through the applications even faster. The EAP started at the foundation with Big Lots back in 2017. Big Lots continues to be one of our programs. We're up to 12 today with what I call two complementary programs. We have one company who has a hardship that they run day-to-day, hardship program that they run day-to-day, as well as they've created two COVID-specific programs this year that help support specific hardships around dependent care and remote schooling. So we've been running those programs outside of their regular everyday hardship. And we have a few in the hopper too. We got a couple programs getting ready to launch soon. So we're growing leaps and bounds. Each program has an annual fee. Year one is a little higher to get started because there's all the work we have to do on our end to get applications set up and help the companies get through the steps I'll explain here in a few minutes of setting up their programs. And then following years, they get adjusted, usually down, based on how many applications they have. So in that year one, depends on the size of the company, as you'll see here in a minute, varies on number of applications. And this next bullet point, I have another slide here in a few minutes that kind of will compare it to the past. But as of this past Friday, we've received 934 applications to date. So it's a 30% increase over the entire year of 2019. And we've granted $535,000 to 340 folks in need. So that's been super exciting for us. So you're probably saying, well, okay, so what does an EAP program kind of look like in general? Well, my favorite phrase so far is it depends. Every program is different. Everyone has its own set of rules and guidelines and nuances. So these 3 bullet points are kind of generalizations a little bit of those 12 programs that we manage today. First one, number of applications per program. The number one question I get asked talking to prospects is, well, how many applications will I have? And I kind of go, I don't know. Hopefully 0, right? The end goal would be to have 0 applications, therefore your employees are all safe and sound and happy, but that's not reality. So what we see is about 1 to 3% of your total employee population will use the program. I also will always tell them it depends on how much you quote unquote advertise or market this program to your associates. Obviously with COVID, you'll see here in a second, it's gone gangbusters because I think it just got talked about a lot more. It's something you don't, out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. And so the more marketing it gets, the more it'll be used. Grant maximums. Every program has a minimum and a maximum amount of money we can grant to the applicant. So our lowest is $500 up to $3,100 and there's always a lifetime max in there. Usually you can't, go to the well more than once or twice in your tenure at your company. And then employee eligibility varies by program as well. It depends on if you're full-time, if you're part-time, if you work in your DC or you work in a store, or are you an intern or a retiree or a temp. So every company kind of gets a worksheet out of the gate, and we help them through picking and choosing all of their eligibility requirements. So EAP in 2020 at the Columbus Foundation, it has had COVID-19 has had a huge impact on the number of applications we have received. So this will show you from 2017, 18, and 19, those are full year numbers. This year we've added so far, I think, 3 new programs to the list. So that does kind of weigh into it a little bit, but the existing programs just have gone through the roof as far as number of applicants applying for assistance. So like I said previously, we're up to 934 as of Friday. I know that number is higher already because yesterday we got more. Mondays at the end of the month seem to be a busy day. So we're already at 30% higher than all of 2019. And again, almost $535,000 in grants to those 340 folks, and it'll definitely be more. When you compare the dollar amount to previous years, it's actually lower. We've had a couple programs where they, in an effort to make sure that they helped more people, lowered their maximum grant amount. So I think if that company had not have changed that policy, this number would be much more closer to almost $1 million, I would think. So the next, my famous logo slide. These are our programs that we have in our wheelhouse today. As you see, there's lots of variety and diversity there. Ranges from retail to quick service food to building and banking. It also varies in size of employees. Some just a couple hundred to some that have nationally thousands of employees. The larger companies with thousands of employees gives us an opportunity to dabble in things like wildfires and hurricanes. We've seen a good increase in wildfire applications in the past few weeks from some of these nationally based companies. So the next few slides are kind of how we go through the process of setting up an EAP program at the foundation. So the first step is going to be a kickoff meeting. We want to understand your goals, your culture, your values, what is important to leadership, what is important to employees. We want to make sure we're helping you craft the program that fits best in your company. We're going to work together to customize those eligibility guidelines. We're going to make sure that every possible scenario you've thought of either is thought through or and crossed off the list or added, and making sure we understand all the hardships and disasters. Because 3 strangers managed your program, we want to make sure that everything is as black as white as possible. We don't like the gray. It leads to too much interpretation on our end. So we want to make sure we fully understand your goals and program guidelines and eligibilities so that we get it right every single time. And then obviously set up that donor advised fund and get your program off the ground as far as having funds to write those grants. Then the next part is the actual kickoff and administration of day-to-day. So we're going to create an application, and I joked, I think, a couple of times that we get applications every which way, and I'm waiting for the courier pigeon to drop off one. We get them online, majority, but we get them from emails, mail, fax, every which way possible. So we collect all the applications. The next step would be to verify employment. We're going to check in with your HR representatives and say, does this person work there? How long have they worked here? Make sure they fit all your employment guidelines. And then probably the part that takes the longest and it has the most complexity is the communication directly with the applicant. I'd say about 90% of our applications come in incomplete. Per the IRS, you have to have documentation of this hardship and the need that you have to fill. So it requires going back to the applicant and asking a series of questions around, what caused your hardship and what needs do you need filled. And, everything from pay stubs to utility bills to fire reports, a lot of COVID tests I've seen come through. So we're constantly going back and forth and back to get what we need from the applicant to kind of ensure that we can be able to approve their grant. The next step after we've kind of have either all we're going to get or everything we need, it goes through a committee process. We have 5 folks at the foundation who review every application for approval and denial, and then we will go through the grant processing management step of entering the grants to a database, cutting checks, mailing things out, following up, saying you've been approved or denied. A lot of cases, when we do deny, we can give recommendations for other resources, local United Ways, local food banks, if it's just something that we can't necessarily help with. And then the last step, which I think is one of my favorite steps actually, is the reporting and optimization stage. So monthly we're counting, or the bean counters, and counting how many applications you have, how many are what stage that they're in. And then on a quarterly basis, we're giving the company a report on the past quarter and essentially year to date of their program. We also send monthly surveys to anyone who's been approved to kind of get feedback directly from the applicant through their process. How fast were we, how kind were we, how efficient were we, so that we can constantly improve and optimize every program. And then we do an annual review with every company to make sure the program's still meeting their needs, the company, as well as the employees. And if we need to make any adjustments and tweaks, add a hardship, take away a hardship, anything like that, we're making those adjustments. And we've seen that recently a lot. In the past, medical expenses were not included in a lot of programs. And as companies have had to increase health costs and deductibles, they're seeing that maybe we should include those medical bills. Internet was another one of those examples we've tweaked along the way of it used to be a luxury and now it's just not. We wouldn't be having this meeting without it. So it ebbs and flows and adjusts as we need to. So that is EAP. I'm happy to answer any questions, or I can turn it on to Matt Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Stephanie. And I will pull up Matt's slides for you all and share them in just a second.
While Lisa's getting those slides up, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Matt Martin. I'm a community research and grants management officer at the Columbus Foundation, and on the team that both works alongside community partners to help address community needs, but also develops community knowledge to help inform the charitable giving of our donors. And so among the many issues that our team has been focused on this year, what I'll share with you here in a moment about the digital divide is something that we've been focused on in helping the community to understand what that digital divide really looks like, what it means, where the opportunities are to close that. And we've been working on the grant making side to help address the needs of nonprofits in the community through our emergency response fund. So 2020 has certainly taught us a lot about the digital divide and the need for technology. As Stephanie just pointed out, we wouldn't be having this meeting without the internet. And though the digital divide was something that a lot of people were talking about before this year, the challenges of this year have really brought into focus the digital divide and its many components more clearly. So it is the internet. It's the infrastructure that brings us the internet. It is how we pay for and acquire the internet in our homes, our offices, businesses. It's the speed and performance of the internet. It's the devices that we get access to and use in order to use the internet. It's our understanding or lack thereof, as you may have been, like so many others, including myself, learning how to navigate in this new digital world early on, and your virtual meeting platforms and getting used to those and figuring out how they work. It's also, as many companies and nonprofits have found throughout this year, also about privacy and cybersecurity. And there's been a lot more cyber attacks. Those have been more common throughout this year. And so when we see how this digital divide has affected schools, nonprofits, businesses, and households, it has been a major opportunity for donors and philanthropy and funders to better understand the digital divide and show up to meet the needs. One of the biggest ways that has happened, of course, is through the CARES Act, and that has brought millions of dollars into communities, including Columbus, to help address a host of things that have happened as a result of the pandemic, not least of which is the need for technology in schools and across our community. The USDA also has a grant program called Reconnect, and the state of Ohio, even in the months leading up to the pandemic, late last year, was really beginning to develop a comprehensive strategy around bridging the digital divide across the state, and has been developing legislation to help do that more effectively as well. As for the Columbus Foundation, very early on, we launched an emergency response fund. I'll talk about that more in a moment. And based on what we've seen, the applications we have seen and grants that have been made, we have actually created sort of an additional arm of that grant program to focus exclusively on the digital divide. And of course, year in and year out, it's not uncommon for us to get applications just in our fund for capital improvements to address technology needs. So we have received to date over 350 applications since early to mid-March. We've been able to make over 160 grants worth almost $6 million with an average grant of $36,000. And over 50 of those grants, so nearly a third of the grants, have had some significant technology component. And what you see here in this word cloud actually is pulled from the grant applications to this emergency response fund. The grant applications that had a technology component built into their request. And we've seen, not just nonprofits trying to meet the technology needs of their clients and the community, but most of these grants are actually helping to address technology gaps within nonprofits themselves, with their employees and their ability to operate and serve the community. This is just a list of the organizations, the kinds of organizations that have received grants from the Emergency Response Fund. So you can see it is organizations you would know, organizations you might not. Organizations large and small have very real technology needs and are stepping up to the plate to really help address those needs across the community as well. So I use this illustration just to kind of represent the digital divide. And when we, right from the get-go, when we think about what is the digital divide and what does it include, when we first start talking about the digital divide, some of the first things that come to mind are just the infrastructure. Do we have fiber and broadband connectivity that even reaches the entire community? Does it stretch into all of the neighborhoods that need it? And is it available to all households in our community? Of course, we think about devices as well. That's a natural thing to look at. It's how we access and use the internet. And of course, our own literacy, both for people working on the internet, parents who are trying to help their kids do school from home on the internet, people who are looking for jobs, people who are looking to enroll in benefits. And so these are, the first three things that really come to mind. But what we have really begun to unpack and learn as a community throughout this year is that it is those things, and it is so much more. And so I want to take a minute just to share some of the initiatives that have been taking place in the community and how the Columbus Foundation has been involved in those. As I mentioned earlier, Innovate Ohio is a fairly new initiative by the state to map the broadband infrastructure and service across the state. We have that for a state, and that's an initiative that's well underway, but we began to realize back in March even that as a community, we didn't have a clear enough understanding of these, of the infrastructure and of the, the details of the digital divide in our own community. And so really a conversation began with the Columbus Metropolitan Library, their CEO, Pat Lazinski, where we really, them being on the front lines of a lot of this, being the places where so many people in our community access the internet, and them knowing exactly how important this issue is, we began to talk with them and other partners in the community and began to discuss how we might better understand and address the digital divide, knowing that it's real, knowing that it's not a luxury anymore. It really is a fourth utility. And what has come from those initial conversations is both a great deal of community knowledge, but also partnership and a comprehensive effort to address a lot of these challenges. One of the first things that we did was the Columbus Foundation funded a civil engineering firm called AECOM. It's a global civil engineering firm that has a presence here in Central Ohio. We funded them to do an analysis of the broadband infrastructure across Columbus. And they have since been able to expand that analysis to cover all of Franklin County. And it taught us a lot of things about the internet, access to the internet, and why it varies so much across the community. We have talked a lot as a community about CARES Act funding in the city of Columbus and its various departments, and city council and the legislative aides have been all hands on deck to try and understand how CARES Act dollars can be used to address some of these needs. Both Columbus City Schools and MORPC submitted applications to the city that were ultimately funded through CARES Act dollars. We have also partnered with the Stanford School of Design, known as the Stanford D School, throughout this summer on a number of different issues, including a digital divide sprint that we did with some high school students from Columbus City Schools, and I'll share more about that as well. And then lastly, we partnered with Partners Achieving Community Transformation. It's an organization based on the Near East Side. And we worked with them and AECOM to conduct a feasibility study of what it would look like to take things learned from that initial report, and then to understand what it would look like to implement them, and how those strategies could help bring the internet to more homes in the Near East Side. And so what we're seeing with that and with the city and Smart Columbus is a host of strategies about to be piloted in neighborhoods across the city to help address some of these divides. And so with the next slide, I'll go into a little bit more detail about some of the things we've learned. This was the AECOM report on the city. One of the big things we learned that came as somewhat of a surprise to a lot of folks in the community is that the infrastructure for the internet across Columbus is actually really strong, both from the private providers, as you see on that pretty dense map on the right, but also the City of Columbus's fiber network, which come to find out is an enviable network of internet infrastructure for a municipality to have. And what we've learned in the expansion of this study to the rest of the county is that really there's internet coverage, service coverage across most, if not all, of the county. In some places, there is maybe only one or two providers, which limits competition and affects prices. But that really is what was clarified through this report, was that it's each household's ability to afford internet, and to afford internet that's going to be high speed enough for all the needs that they might now be having if they find themselves working from home, if they have multiple kids learning from home. And so we really, as a community, began to, with those lessons, shift our focus onto how to make the internet more affordable and more available to homes that have low income and whose $60, $70 a month is really difficult to cover, as well as devices, and making sure that, especially as we go back to, as we started school in the fall, that every kid had a device in order to learn from home, whether it was in a hybrid model or a completely remote model. This is just some of the work that was done on the feasibility study on the Near East Side, piloting some new technologies and some additional infrastructure to help make the internet not just more available, not to duplicate infrastructure, but to really put infrastructure in place that's going to allow the price and the accessibility of actually getting the internet installed and available in homes to increase that. And so with, again, really under the leadership of PACT and their president, Autumn Glover, there are new pilot initiatives that are really on the cusp of being implemented here on the Near East Side. And we're hoping, of course, that that doesn't just increase access to the internet for homes in that neighborhood, but that there are lessons learned that enable those things to be implemented more widely across the community. Because, of course, what gave so much urgency to the digital divide efforts this year was the thought of having so many kids potentially missing part or all of a year of school or even more. Back in the spring, toward the end of last school year, Columbus City Schools started noticing a lack of engagement of students, and they mapped that out and saw that depending on how engagement was measured, there are students who either didn't log in at all, or maybe only logged in to keep up with school remotely once or twice. And so anywhere from 20 to up to 50% of students were unengaged or engaged in a limited way. And so that became a real clarion call for a lot of this work, and community partners coming together. You can see now, as of this fall, there's over 48,000, almost 49,000 students enrolled in the district. And yet, even with a lot of these efforts, they estimate that that just under 60% of students are fully engaged. And there's a couple different models that they've developed to help students stay engaged. Of course, the Digital Academy, as well as the remote learning model, where you're in class daily on Zoom with the teachers you would be in. But all of this to say that despite our best efforts, the need is so great, and it's so multifaceted that it is so much more than just having a hotspot and a device. And one of the things that we did, as I mentioned, was a series of design sprints based around the idea of human-centered design and solving with and not for people who are really feeling the brunt of the challenges brought on by the pandemic. And so we co-designed some solutions and some ideas with designers trained by the Stanford D School, but also Columbus High School students. You'll see a couple of the things that we came up with because so much of what we heard from students, both those who designed with us, as well as students that we interviewed, the challenges that they talked about had nothing to do with technology. They had to do with feeling like school was still worth doing in this remote context, feeling like they had lost a lot of the motivation. Maybe it was staying eligible to be on the track team, or the real-time feedback of mentors and teachers in school, and just really needing a new reason to get out of bed and do school, whatever format that looks like. And so we came up with things like daily check-ins and care packages. They call them Stoke boxes, things that helped students really still feel like school was worth getting up for in this context. And so you can imagine high school students having to really think through that. You may have experienced it yourself in a remote work context. This is my kindergarten daughter. She is doing kindergarten in a remote learning context as we speak. And if you can imagine having the internet, having a device, having those brilliant blue headphones, but any 5-year-old getting them to sit still and stay on track and troubleshoot any technology issues, you can imagine the many other challenges that will come along with this remote learning context. And so one of the things that has been propped up very quickly over the last month are something called learning extension centers. And there are a host of organizations coming together to pull these off, but they're basically a small number of students in-person, on-site locations where they can get a meal, they can get tech support, they can get tutoring, and just the support of caring adults. There are over 160 of these already across the city, and they're being implemented by churches, by nonprofits, by all kinds of organizations. Children's Hunger Alliance is providing meals to these sites. You get a sense of how it is. The digital divide really is about technology and technology solutions, but it is about so much more. And it is about us really coming together as a community to make sure everyone's included. Because I think as this final slide really illustrates, that the digital divide is such a challenge in such a way that really we can provide devices, we can have internet access, be ubiquitous across our community, but it's really the community that gets everyone across this divide, not just with the devices in hand and the internet service that they need, but in all ways continuing to learn, find work, be able to work in whatever context. It's the community that's able to do that that is going to be most positioned to thrive on the other side of this pandemic and beyond. And so it really does take us coming together as a community in order to bridge that divide. It's these things and it's relationships and it's connectivity in every sense of the word. And so with that, I will pass it back to Lisa and entertain any questions folks might have. There's one in the chat.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah, I think to maybe Ted's question, there are organizations like I Know I Can and YMCA and City Year that are all helping as well with these learning extension centers. The school districts themselves are often the ones distributing Chromebooks and devices through the individual schools and principals. The Columbus City School District acquired over $7 million of City CARES Act dollars and purchased 20,000 Chromebooks, which they are still in the process of distributing in an effort to get a 1-to-1 device to student ratio.
All right, thank you. And thank you to Brad and Stephanie and Matt for sharing your expertise with us today. And thank you for everyone who attended. And please, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Just a reminder that we have a lot of attorneys, CPAs, philanthropic advisors on our team, and we're here to help you help your clients reach their charitable goals. So however that may look and however that may be in this time of COVID, we are here, we are working, and we're happy to help in any way we can. So just a little taste of everything we are doing, and there's lots more. So please feel free to reach out to us, and thank you again for joining us today. Take care and have a great day.